microorganisms are around. I mean, they're not our bodies and everywhere. And it just probably was chlorine. Maybe started it with chloramines, and but just the toxicity in what comes out of the tap from the pipes on down to the source itself. And so I wanted clean water for little bitty children like my son, who are the canaries in the mine. You know, I mean, I just wanted clean water, clean water. I wanted to trust my source.
So, who else feels the same way? Who doesn't trust their municipal source? This is I think this is the crux of the question. Who doesn't trust their municipal source?
I tend to trust it, but almost nobody I know does. Very few people, even in San Francisco, trust municipal source.
Why?
There's worms in it, for Christ's sake.
Why?
You never know. You just never know. They tell you.
So, let me ask you this. Why do you not trust the municipal source, and why do you trust this source?
Oh, I don't buy that. I take that as the least
Okay.
possible.
I won't ask you. I'll put that to the general public. Why would you not trust a municipal source and trust this source?
That's not as frequent as a municipal source.
That's not as frequent as a municipal source. Fair enough. Why else do you... I think this is really pertinent.
Because I think that although they monitor and everything else, I think that people believe that things can change, things can leach in, just as you pointed out. They're putting much more PVC pipes instead of the old metal pipes in there. So now you find a very, very clean water at the source, but by the time it gets to your faucet, who knows what's happening? And I think.
But this is shipped in plastic too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to get up here and advocate tap water or the other source at all. I'm trying to actually elicit just why people don't trust or do trust. What actually makes that up? Because this is shipped in plastic bottles. If you're concerned about the environment, what has a greater environmental footprint? The smart water that's actually boiled and redistilled down, or the water that you just open your tap?
Oh, crap.
What about the oil that goes into making this plastic bottle? I think these are pertinent questions. Go ahead, Jeff.
When my 110-year-old Victorian apartment, they've done a lot of work on the plumbing in the last couple of years, and they'll turn the water supply off for a day. And that night when I come home, the water runs brown for at least an hour. And so one thought is, well, wherever that brown stuff is coming from, it's at a very low concentration most of the time, and I don't see it. Now I'm seeing a lot of it, and maybe I shouldn't have any of it, even if it isn't a low concentration. I don't even know what it is.
See, this is a great point. I think this is important. For a wide populace, that may not be the experience. That is experience related to your home. So you have to make decisions for you based on that. For you, it may not make sense because you have those conditions. Maybe you invest in a filter system. Maybe you just drink bottled water because of it. Maybe you make choices based on that. For me, I don't have that condition at all. Suddenly tap water because I don't mind the taste. I certainly don't mind the cost. Maybe that makes more sense for me. It's a balancing of all these choices that come in, balancing all these factors that comes into play. But we can't make that choice unless we're able to move past sort of the fear associated with a lot of these factors. If we associate bottled water as being healthy, then that factor is already out of play. If we associate tap water with being bad for us, well, in terms of health, well, that's already made. If we're making that choice out of pure marketing and pure fear, pure anything beyond actual evidence or experience, I think that's a choice being made for us, not a choice we're making independently. I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
I believe it was the water fluoride, and I really didn't like the taste of San Francisco water because of all that fluoride in it. And I think there's a large population probably said, well, I don't be drinking water that's even now had fluoride in it. Maybe they're thinking, what else is being added to it?
So he said he didn't like the taste of water when he initially came to San Francisco. He smelled the fluoride. Go ahead. We'll take a quick break after this.
Just like one thing from the chat is chloramines, chlorine. It's very detrimental to your body, and that's.
How do you know that?
Well,
Is it experience? Did you read it somewhere?
National Science Foundation.
NSF, about chloramines being detrimental to you. I think it's really important is what
One thing I will not drink from the tap.
you won't drink from the tap. That's great. But you're making a choice too. By using a carbon block, you're making a choice as well. That carbon comes from somewhere. What company are you buying it from?
It's on solid block, multi-pure.
Multi-pure. Okay, so it's a coal-based carbon that's imported from China. That is actually.
No.
Oh, it is.
Well, it might be manufactured there now. The main thing is it's a solid block. It's not grain.
I understand what you're saying. It's a solid block of carbon. The coal is mined out of China. It's shipped over here. It's grinded. It's actually molded with a plastic resin to form into a block. Then it's packaged by Multipure. In the process of all that, there's an environmental impact. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or the wrong choice or anything else.
I would hope that it's tested.
That is the truth behind it.
No.
And last comment before we leave, carbon blocks actually don't pull out metals. They just don't. They have to be impregnated with a resin to do that.
Well, that's what's good. Leave the minerals.
Well, you mentioned earlier that it takes out metals, so that's the only reason I make that comment. So let's take a quick 5-minute break. After the break, I'll answer any question you have. We don't have to go by any script here. This is kind of your choice tonight. So we'll come back in like 5 minutes. I'm blogging on my website, so if you go to sciencecafesf.com, you can see all the numbers and all the associations that we talked about tonight. So when it comes to like environmental carbon footprint, I sort of lay out which of these has the highest footprint to the least. So you can look at the numbers and see. When you talk about cost, I lay out the profit margins for each of these companies and the relative cost. So you can see all of that. It's all up there on sciencecafesf.com. All right, let's do cost because I care. Money is a good, quick intro, and we'll talk about it quickly. What is does anyone know how much tap water costs here in the city? 0.01 cents. It's a little less than that. It is 0.008 of a cent per gallon. It's basically $3 per 1,000 gallons. And of course, so if you calculate that out to liters, this is like $1.50. This one liter bottle. It is a 2,000 factor price differential between the two. 2,000. I was like, that is pretty significant. I can't think of anything that I pay 2,000 times as much for in my life. So that's a big cost difference. The other thing I want to talk about when it comes to cost is, these two. So, water is big business. 3 companies own 65% of the bottled water market. What are those 3 companies? Anyone know?
Pepsi?
Pepsi is one of them. They own Aquafina, which had $1.5 billion in sales last year.
Don't tell me it's Monsanto.
It's not Monsanto. Well, if it's Pepsi, yeah, Coke is the other one. They actually just bought Smart Water. And they do Dasani. Anheuser-Busch only makes crappy beer, as far as I know. As far as I know. The third company is Nestle. Nestle owns pretty much every spring water company you've heard of, except for probably Crystal Geyser. They own Poland Spring, they own Perrier, they own San Pellegrino, they own Arrowhead, they own you keep naming any spring water you can think of that's domestically bottled, and a French company owns it, Nestle. So they own 65% of the market. So why do these companies care about water so much? So I'll put it in this frame. Really quick anecdote. Coke has been making Coca-Cola for a long time. And they make it in Atlanta, they make it in Seattle, they make it all around the country. They have different plants. They want Coke to taste the same in Atlanta as it does in San Francisco. So in their plant, they already had water purification systems sitting there. So when they buy municipal water to make Coke, they run it through filters. So then some genius, who's hopefully like retired and really rich, because this is a huge idea, said, why don't we just bottle the water? Right? I mean, it makes, they don't add as much to the product. They already have the distribution model because they're selling into all these stores. So they took it a little step farther. They took their filtration equipment for Coke and upgraded it. So it's pretty sophisticated what they do for Dasani. But it's essentially, they had all the equipment, they had all the expertise, they had all the distribution. Coke tends to make, on a bottle of Dasani, if you buy a $1.50 bottle of Dasani, they tend to make between 10 and 20 cents on the actual sale of the product, and they make somewhere between 20 and 30 cents on distribution. So they make almost 33%. That margin is unheard of for any other product they sell. It's incredibly high margin product. Here's the thing I want you to know about cost, because I think it's pretty key. They let the retailer, the cafes, the Targets, everyone else, they let them keep between 33 and 40% profit. Starbucks' highest margin profit product beyond those stupid flavor shots is bottled water. It's a product you have to do no work on, has a market already built in, and has a high margin. I want to highlight this because most stores are given the impetus to sell you water, to get you hooked on it. They're given a monetary incentive to do so. It's sort of like a key component. And it doesn't sound like, 10 cents a bottle, 20 cents a bottle, it doesn't sound like a lot of money. It adds up pretty quick when you're talking about the growth of this industry. Last year was $35 billion in terms of the monetary value of this industry. It's more than movie tickets. So.
Is there any research on the horizon? I haven't seen anything on Discovery Channel, Science Channel, some sort of replacement for polycarbonates.
Yeah, there's already new polycarbonates on the market. It's called Triton, Triton. It's basically, it has the same look and feel as polycarbonate, has a different plasticizer in it instead of bisphenol A.
Is inert?
As far as we know. That's literally all I can tell you. The way the FDA approves a product like that for use is on a short-term basis. We've talked about this in plenty of science cafes before. They can't do a 10, 15, 20-year study on the impact, the health impact, because they don't have the capacity or the resources to do so.
It's not fossil fuel-based?
Fossil fuel-based?
Well, I guess that was the implication of my question, is it's not fossil fuel-based?
Oh, no. No. The FDA doesn't care about fossil fuels.
Well, that's what I meant by replacement, something that says, like plastic, but not fossil fuel-based. Well, that's not an extra.
Okay. So you're asking about a plastic replacement that is not made from oil.
That's like glass and not heavy. That's the thing about plastic. It is so malleable. It's so convertible, but it's not.
So
like
right here's the
glass.
answer. Corn.
Like
What's the corn additive? What's the corn product you're thinking of?
I think they use corn husks, aren't they, to make the bags and so that's a racket.
It's called PPA. It's a plastic that is made from corn. It's the problem with it in terms of water is that sunlight, right now with that corn plastic, sunlight exposure breaks it down, so you can't leave it, you can't subject it to, sitting outside or anything like that. There's lots of concerns about it in bottled water use from the manufacturer perspective.
I don't know. In third world countries, a lot of places where you travel, you'll find bottled water and the efforts to get clean water to these communities. Do you have anything on the efficiency of that, the safety of it? I mean, I've seen them, we check the seal and all that kind of stuff. But what's going on with those things? Is there anything out there?
So the question is about the use of bottled water in third world countries. I don't have a lot of data about that at this point. I know there's a lot of efforts to do so. Most of the efforts that are ongoing are mainly based on sustainable, that are more geared towards local economy. And those are more like filtration or some sort of mechanism for them to clean their water source rather than bring it in from somewhere else. That's all I have to say about that.
Could you mention something about, unless you've already mentioned it, about the pollution of these plastic water bottles? Lots of things you recycle, but then, a lot of this stuff seems to...
Wait, say that just a little louder for me because I couldn't quite hear you.
Could you mention something about the pollution of these plastic bottles? Because yes, people like to think they're being recycled, but as you know, they get out into the seawater. I've travelled through Egypt and other places, and you see these damn things all over the place.
Okay.
These are building houses and walls and everything.
Okay, so this is aluminum. What do you think the recycling rate for aluminum is in the state of California? No, the recycling rate.
What do you mean?
How much aluminum is purchased versus how much is recycled. 30%, 40. It's actually 79.8% as of last year. And aluminum is very cost effective to recycle from an energetic standpoint. They don't count the Reynolds wrap. The way this is counted is only from like beverage soda containers. So it's not a true every aluminum that you've ever used, but I mean, it indicates sort of rough recycling rates. So this is PET plastic, also recyclable. What's the recycling rate here in California? I'm talking about 2007 numbers. 25%, 15, 10. Generally lower. You're right. It was close to 50%. And here I think is something interesting. So everyone know what CRV is? It's essentially the tax we pay on every bottle. It's container recycling value. It's like 5 cents on each bottle that we purchase. In states that have something like that, the recycling rates across the board are 10 to 20% higher on every product. So the national rate for this is something like 30%. Well, her comment was about it's supplemental income from homeless people. It's true. But the recycling rate for PET, we'll talk about that. When it gets recycled, it gets something called downcycle. It never gets recycled back into bottles because the FDA says you can't do it because we're concerned about bacteria regrowth. So they turn it into like the soles of my shoes, plastic decking. It's actually very energy intensive to recycle this product back into bottles. So that's why they downcycle it. It gets shredded up. Well, first it gets piled into bales, then it gets shredded up, and then it gets shipped back to China, and then it gets converted to something usable and shipped back here. Generally, that's about 40% of the recycling market gets shipped back to China and then brought back as a new product. There's more, as the oil price stays around $100, $110, there's a greater push for private companies to come in and scour dumps and actually pull out the PET plastic because it has value at that rate because it's such an important byproduct. And the FDA is starting to allow the inclusion of recycled material in plastic bottles up to 5% at this point. So we are starting to see a greater increase in the recycling rates, but at this point it's incredibly poor, which is the chief complaint about this plastic.
So where's the other 50%? Maybe you answered the question, but I was thinking, does it end up in seawater or in the environment? Just throw away waste that breaks down. Also, how long does it take to break down the sun?
Well, the breakdown question is always asked. There's no real answer to that because breakdown to what is the question that always follows. It lasts a long time. That's all you need. It'll last well beyond us in this kind of state. Is the way I'll answer that breakdown question. Where it ends up in the places that we know. It ends up in the middle of the ocean. It ends up in the landfill. We went on a tour of the SF dump not more than a couple months ago. We looked out in the dump. What's the most common thing we saw? It was plastic. So and seagulls. Those are the two most common things you see with that.
Seagulls.
Yeah.
Well, when you were talking about that London bottle that has a 50% recycling rate, what kind of plastic is that?
This is PET plastic. Has a number 1 on the
Is
bottom.
that the same as what most other
Yeah.
bottle are? I was under the impression that the recycling rate was a lot lower than that.
That's what the 2007 recycling rates for bottled PET was last year in California.
California.
Nationally, it's like 30%.
I have one other question. I was also under the impression that you couldn't actually melt down PET and make it into what you could make out of virgin PET. Like you can't actually make a plastic bottle out of it once you melt it and cheese it.
So the question is, can you actually make a plastic bottle out of a plastic bottle? You can. It is energetically intensive to do so. So it costs a lot of money to do so. As the price of oil keeps going up, it becomes more and more feasible to do it. Economically feasible.
But it's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
FDA.
FDA does not allow it at this point. That's cost. So in terms of cost, you see tap water wins. It's not even close. What's your question? So in terms of cost, that's how it goes. In terms of environment, this is a great one. I think this is fun. What do you think the GHG emissions are of these waters? Like, what would you think in terms of carbon footprint? Which water has the greatest carbon footprint? You got Fiji, Aquafina, Smart Water, and this spring water that's imported in a glass bottle from Scotland.
Well, if it's from far away, it's literally.
Is it bottled in Scotland?
It's bottled in Scotland. So we'll rank them from most to least. So which one do you think, guys, is the most? Fiji is sort of winning out, okay? The second, Scotland, Smart Water, Aquafina. Smart Water.
Scotland.
Some people at Scotland.
The glass is heavier, so it's more gas. Oh boy, that's heavy. So it's more.
The glass tends to weigh 4 times as much. Just the glass, but once you fill it with water, the difference is only about 10%. In terms of the actual, it's this. This is the most, and these go down for the same amount of water. And tap water is like somewhere over here. It's sort of, most is the Fiji water, and the Fiji water is the most because of this. It's because they make the bottles in China, they ship them to Fiji, they bottle it in Fiji. Here's an awesome point about Fiji water. There's 1 million people in Fiji that don't have adequate access to clean water. Yeah, I'm about to get to that. That's a great comment. Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, it's just really ironic. Recently, I've seen a huge marketing campaign, which is probably dealing with this issue. It says, put eco in your system. Fiji Green is the name of the website.
Yeah.
And they're actually marketing that they're the most environmentally sensitive bottled water on the market.
Well, the reason they say that is they have the highest GHG number. They're the poster child for terrible carbon footprint of any bottled water that exists. What they did is they have invested in carbon offsets to the point where they're carbon neutral by, I think, 2011 or 2012 or something. So their GHG emissions haven't changed. They're just taking a lot of their profits and putting it back into carbon negative sources.
People have no water.
That's sort of the offensive part that I think comes back to an issue that I think we'll get to soon. What do you consider water? Is it a right? Is it a commodity? Is it something to be privatized? Well, I think you have a clear idea what it should be. So, this is the carbon footprint going down. It is the reason that this one is the most because of pure transportation of how it's done. This is the second most because, again, it's shipped halfway across the world in a glass bottle. And the actual comparison of using glass versus polyethylene, or PET, I'm sorry, is on my website. You can see the numbers. I thought it wouldn't be that big of a difference. It is. It's pretty significant. This is the third most because you boil the water and distill it back down. That takes a lot of energy. Of course that takes a lot of energy. And this is kind of like over here because it's tap water that's just filtered. So it's just the energy of filtering and distribution and the plastic bottle. The best analogy I have in terms of the plastic bottles footprint is Peter Glick of the Pacific Institute, which is a nonprofit in the East Bay that studies water. Great resource. Says that if you take a plastic bottle and fill it up a quarter with oil, that's pretty much the energy, that represents the energy used to produce that bottle. So in the case of this plastic bottle, they say it takes 3 liters of water to make 1 liter of water because of the water use. It takes a quart of the oil to generate the energy used.
Is that taking into account that the plastic is made from the byproducts of oil petroleum already?
See, that's a great question. There are byproducts, so like there's no good way of doing that calculation. It's not. There is a glut of that product, these byproducts, but not to the point where their price isn't linear with the price of oil at this point. And I think that's purely from the standpoint of PET is used very heavily in this country right now. So there is sufficient demand to meet supply. That's the way I can answer that question. So that's it. That's kind of the way it goes when it comes to the environment. Tap water has the least, only because like it has the least amount of processing associated with it. And packaging. That's a good point. I want to get back to chloramine because there was a question about chloramine. I never dealt with it. So chloramine. San Francisco water is treated with chloramine and not chlorine. Chloramine is different from chlorine. It's a high school chemistry lesson. Is ClNH2, which is an ammonia basically complex with chlorine. When it breaks down water, it does the same thing chlorine does, but it's not as strong as a disinfectant. Essentially, when chlorine gets into water, it has a free electron and it attacks bacterial cell walls and breaks them open so that it kills them. So chloramine works the same way, but it's not as strong as a disinfectant because of just the nature of the reaction in the water. Important thing about chloramine. Why was the switch made? You say it's more stable. Why do you think the switch is made from chlorine to chloramine? Cost.
Oh, man. Well, the water company told us in their little flyers
The water company
that
said-
it tasted better.
It tasted better. So here's the thing. I think it's a purely cost perspective. And that has to do with stability. And it has a little to do with taste. So you guys are all right. SF water doesn't have to be filtered because there's there's two categories that are important. TDS, which we talked about earlier, total dissolved solids, and TTHMs, which are total trihalomethane, which is what happens when a chlorine molecule reacts to an organic molecule in the water. So like imagine like a piece of dirt that's full of carbon. It reacts to that and forms something called a TTHM. Now TTHMs are highly regulated because they're associated with increased risk for certain cancers. So they're really regulated well below the point of any sort of risk. The chlorine tends to form more TTHMs than chloramine does. So if SF continually was to use chlorine, they would start to hit standards that would require them to filter the water because of the lowering of the regulation on TTHMs. So they said, so we either install filtering equipment, which is a really high capital expense, or we switch our disinfectant to something else. And over a long process, they selected chloramine because it was the cheapest and it was the most stable. Chlorine tends to evaporate in sunlight. Chloramine does not. Now, those are the advantages. That's why the SFPUC really made the switch, as cost considerations. It was the cheapest solution for them. Now, it has complications. What are some of the complications that you guys are aware of?
It rots the rubber in your plumbing.
It rots the rubber in your plumbing. What are the other complications? Kills your fish.
Nerve damage.
Nerve damage? Where did you hear that from?
Any studies on you yourself?
We're about to get to that. I'm just curious, first of all, what people have heard about chloramine.
I heard about chlorine that it was toxic to nerves.
Oh, chlorine, but not chloramine.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
And then it doesn't evaporate, so therefore it gets absorbed into your body.
It doesn't evaporate, so it gets absorbed into your body.
Ruins the taste of homebrew.
Ruins the taste of Sean's beer. It does. It really, really does. I've been to Sean's place, and he made beer with chloramine water. It tastes bad. It tastes really, really bad. So those are all right. Chloramine reduces the pH. It makes it more acidic, the water. It tends to corrode your copper pipes and rubber, especially rubber gaskets, more than anything than the chlorine-treated water. It tends to taste less like chlorine, but is more aggressive against your household plumbing. The second thing, it kills fish because it doesn't evaporate out of the water. Chlorinated water, if you just kind of let sitting there for a little while, the chlorine just leaves the water. Chloramine, that doesn't happen. Fish can't handle chloramine, so you have to filter it to use it. Okay, so what does that mean? If fish are dying from chloramine, doesn't that like make you a little like, well, what does that do to me? In terms of human interaction, there aren't many studies on chloramine in terms of prolonged impact. It's only been used for 6 years on a regular basis at any municipal facility. It's not a lot of data. That is the fact. Now, in terms of any studies that have indicated any sort of like risk, there aren't any of those either. The only ones that have come out is there's been some medical surveys of people that are essentially allergic to it, that they develop rashes to it. Most of those people, they see that effect when they take showers. They'll actually see like a rash form. Essentially, they're allergic to the introduction of the new chemical.
Wouldn't this be an FDA issue before they get added to the water?
It is. Welcome to the wonderful world of government. The FDA governs these guys. The EPA governs tap water. Two different agencies. If you were to ask me which I would trust more, not that I really trust either of them extensively, I trust the EPA more. They've been studying water for a really long time. The FDA has been studying water since bottled water was forced upon them. And generally how it works is the EPA comes up with a guideline, and the FDA copies it when it's convenient for them to copy it. So, if there's like a new arsenic regulation on water, the EPA will send the FDA a memo and say, hey, I have a new regulation, look at this. And the FDA will like kind of do their thing, and a year later there's a new arsenic regulation on bottled water. That's not anything nefarious, that's just how government works.
Is chloramine used in Europe or anywhere other countries?
Chloramine is not used in Europe. They use ozone in Europe. It's purely ozonated water. It is used in other countries. I don't believe Canada is one of them, but it is used in other countries. It is mainly used in the U.S. though. Lion's share.
Someone said it was okay in this country, EPA said okay to use chloramine.
The EPA said yes, chloramine is safe to use. So, I mean, I'll highlight this point. This is the truth as I can tell it to you. There is no study indicating that there is any risk from using chloramine, any significant risk from using chloramine. And chloramine hasn't been used for that long for those studies to happen. Those are both the truth.
Is there any way to filter it out and just bring
Okay.
it the pure?
Next question. Is there any way to filter it out? Yes. Yes, there are plenty of ways to filter it. The two most effective are reverse osmosis combined with some sort of activated carbon media. But that's really the most effective. So a Brita filter, a pure filter, will remove most of it. But if you want it to be truly effective, I think if you're using it for fish, you have to use RO, right?
Yeah.
Do you have fish? Do you use RO?
I was fine outside, and with a very low trickle and a large filter. But when I had a filter jam, it filled up.
What kind of filter?
Gravel and bioactive.
Oh, okay.
Just a natural.
So, yes, activated carbon media does remove a lot of the chloramine, but RO is the way to remove 100% of it.
Doesn't RO remove a lot of the good stuff in water?
Yes, RO is a good way to remove everything except the water.
Yeah, but is RO available to homeowners?
Okay, here. So we're at the filtration question.
FYI, just a little FYI. Reverse osmosis. In my early days of trying to convince people to convert to a solid block carbon on their tap, just for home use, reverse osmosis at that time, 25 years ago, wasted a lot of water. And that is an issue with reverse osmosis. I believe to this day, however, it's been improved and the wastage is not as much. However, it does take out minerals that the solid block carbon does not, supposedly. And I'm sorry, I haven't looked into this lately. But FYI, reverse osmosis was a great water waster. And however, that's the essence of desalination in countries around the world. Anywhere you see people desalinating water, it's a reverse osmosis process. And the problem with that is the wastewater that goes into the oceans there off banks where the fish live and blah, blah, blah.
So the question about RO, like going back to your initial question, where do I get one? You can get one at Home Depot if you want. They sell like RO things basically at Home Depot, Lowe's, any home improvement store. They're big. Bill, what kind of water filtration system you use? Right there? You have a
This is
carbon.
not filtered.
Oh, that's not filtered?
This is what everybody liked.
You did all right.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All
I'm
right.
planning on installing a filter, but I haven't gotten it.
Okay.
But I do
The
think
fil-
on all the coffee and the ice.
How big is a cartridge?
It's
Like
very
this big?
small.
So it's about this big for an RO cartridge. And usually you get a system that has like 2 or 3 cartridges in it. So it's about this long.
Wastewater machine?
So RO does waste water. It does waste, like the approximate count is like for every unit of water that goes in, it's somewhere between an eighth and a sixth of the water is wasted.
And is
It's
it
pretty
costly to maintain an RO system?
So an RO system will cost you about $150 to install, upfront cost.
Are you maintaining?
No, you have to maintain it, and the ongoing cartridge cost is how much you pay per
You
cartridge.
can spend anywhere, it depends on how many gallons you want per
Yeah.
hour
Yeah.
or per day, however they rate it. But you can spend anywhere between $40 to $100 on a cartridge that you replace maybe once every 2 years.
So we're talking a couple $100 every couple of years. So $100 a year is probably
Does
good.
the systems have a catchment for the unused water?
No, they basically the wastewater. There's a reservoir that fills up, and so when that reservoir is full, it stops pumping water to the membrane. So if you have a 2.5 gallon reservoir, sure, maybe there's a gallon and a half that's been lost at that point, but it'll stop flowing through the membrane at that point.
So dump it into the washing machine.
Yeah, I haven't done anything with the wastewater yet. I haven't figured that part out.
I think you made the beer out of it.
Yeah, possibly.
So what's your question?
Pasta.
Pasta.
So the water.
This is not a
I
question I expected.
Pasta?
The water that I drink, basically in the glass, or for tea, I use the pure filter for.
Okay.
But when I make pasta, I just fill up a big pot with water and I throw the liquid in. Am I absorbing the chloramine into the pasta?
So the question is, so she uses her pure filter when she drinks the water, but when she's cooking, she uses just water. And she mentioned pasta because pasta is like something like, I don't know, like 60% water or so, 50%.
You fill a really big pot.
It absorbs a lot of water. The point is, when you boil water, the chloramine doesn't leave. It doesn't. It doesn't. You have to do some if you rigorously boil and just let it sit there a while, yeah, it does. But it doesn't leave like chlorine does. Like
Protein.
so, it's not.
Protein.
So yes, anytime you cook with food that has impurities in it, some percentage is going to go in. And in terms of the concentration that you're absorbing, so the way they dose chloramine is that the maximum allowable limit to come out is 4 ppm, 4 milligrams per liter. Generally speaking, most people can taste it at that level. If you taste and smell chlorine off your tap, it's probably at about 4 ppm. Some people are more sensitive down to like 2. SF water generally comes out between 2 and 3 is what it's coming out at. 2 milligrams per liter. So you're cooking pasta, well, probably like 2 liters of water or so. We're talking about 4 milligrams, and then whatever the pasta gets absorbed, we're talking very minuscule amount, probably micrograms. No, that's just the amount it absorbs. Like, I can't tell you if it's better. Like, I'll keep coming back to this. There's no indication in any significant study that chloramine has some sort of deleterious effect on it. Now, common sense tells us, well, I'm not going to go get a bucket of chloramine and eat it, but there's a risk associated with it, but the risk hasn't been determined by any stretch.
But it'll kill your fish.
It'll kill your fish.
I don't know if you answered this question, but in the water, is this water purely distilled? I'm talking about the water in the bottles. Is this water completely distilled? In other words, there's no added minerals? Because I've got a second backup question about...
Which are you talking about? One of these bottles in particular?
Yeah, bottled water in general. Is it got minerals in it, or is it completely distilled? In other words,
it depends on which one you're talking about. Distilled implies that you boil it and actually condense it back down.
Right.
So the only one of these that does that is Smart Water, and it says on the side it's vapor distilled. So they boil it and distill it back down. Fiji contains a large mineral content, and it says so right here. Silica 85 milligrams per liter, calcium 17 milligrams, magnesium 13. It's because it's not filtered or anything at all. It comes from deep within a rock. Of course, it's going to have some mineral content. The spring water will also tend to have a fair amount of mineral content, not as much as an artisanal water, which comes through rock. The Aquafina is going to have the least because it goes through an RO system. The Smart Water is a little weird because even though it's distilled, they add electrolytes back in. Because, they're trying to be like some sort of Gatorade.
Okay, now here's a study that was done probably in the 60s in England. Just to give it, so you can understand how well the study was done, they did it on the whole population of England, 65 million people. And up at that time, people never travelled more than 5 to 10 miles to go to work. You just wouldn't take a job more than 10 miles. So you had a very, very static population over generations. So they started looking at soft water in Wales. The water goes through cold, so the water is extremely soft, so you get lots of suds. Where I grew up in Kent, all the water goes through chalk, so it has lots of calcium carbonate, potassium carbonate, all these different carbonates in it, so it's extremely hard, it throws up all your pipes and everything. So they started looking, the British government started looking at population life longevities and what illnesses people got. And what they saw is that people were dying much earlier in soft water districts like Wales. And they were taking into account, of course, all the variations. And they found all the people living in the harder the water, the longer people lived and the less diseases they had. So everybody started realising that softening the water stopped softening your drinking water. You've got to take those minerals.
I've never read that study that you're referring to. It is historically well known that people visited mineral baths and spas and all sorts of things like that, extol the virtues of mineral waters. So on that, I won't argue with you. In terms of the actual studies, all those are experientially based generally. So I've never read a study that indicates people live longer by drinking mineral water versus not. But you can't.
The population was static. And that's the,
yeah.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I haven't read many studies to indicate that. I think if there was a significant number of studies that showed the same thing, it would be more public knowledge. I would say.
It's a statistical thing. It was just like when China did that thing about molybdenum. They saw this esophageal cancer, and they found that people were getting it. There was a lack of molybdenum in the soil. So
sure. To your point, I think there's a lot of experiential evidence around the use of mineral water. Even in that study, it kind of points to that fact that having something in our water, especially if it's calcium or magnesium, minerals that we need or use every day, there are beneficial effects. Quantifying what that effect is, I think, is going to be extremely difficult. But knowing that is the case, weighing that out between drinking water that's just water versus water that has minerals in it, I think that's a really difficult question to answer. Really difficult question to answer. I don't think we'll ever answer it. I think what you can know is I like to take the long view, is that I've been a human on this planet for a long time. I've evolved from a lot of things. I'm going to try to stick with what I evolved with to the best I can, because that's probably what's optimal for me. So having little minerals in my water, probably not so bad for me. And the idea of stripping out everything from water, which is what these guys sell you on, I disagree with, because I think water should have stuff in it.
It actually tastes a lot better as well. You can really tell if you travel around England, you can literally tell where you are because of the taste of the water.
Are people snootier too, where the water tastes better?
Is reverse osmosis somewhat like distilled water?
Yes, but I think the key difference is the energy used. I mean, reverse osmosis wastes a lot of water. Distilled water uses a lot of energy. Pick your
In other
poison.
words, the taste is, and we're talking about taste, definitely should be flattered.
So, what are some, like, we're basically at the home stretch here. What are some, like, final questions people ask?
Is there any?
Hang on, there's one in the back. I'll come to you.
I've heard a rumor there's a study done with showering as far as chlorine related to breast cancer or something like that. France doesn't have it.
But what was the contaminant? I didn't quite hear you.
I'm sorry?
You said chlorine?
Chlorine in showers and shower water being related to breast cancer. The French don't have that because they don't chlorinate water.
I've never heard the link between chlorine and breast cancer, so I can't speak to what you're particularly asking about. But in showers, you do absorb more water than you do by essentially by drinking it. You put yourself in an environment where the water is vaporized, you're exposing it to large contingents of your skin. There is a lot of absorption of whatever is in the water in a shower, more so than any other condition in your home. In terms of the link to cancer, I've never heard of that between chlorine. And the Go ahead. I'll come to you.
Barring cost for a moment, what would you say is an ideal system for home filtration? I mean, I've been to the Green Festival and I've seen some systems that are thousands of dollars.
Here in San Francisco?
Yes.
Here in San Francisco. So you definitely, you're at the point where you've decided, I want a home system.
No,
What's the best one?
I'm using Brita now. I assume that's fairly useless. But
No, there's a lot of stuff. But in terms, how many people live in your home?
Me and 2 large dogs.
Two large-
Over there.
2 large dogs. And how much are you willing to spend?
What's ideal?
What's ideal?
Are we talking taste?
See, this is a complicated thing. I can give you a recommendation based on what I think of. Like, for me, tap water tastes fine. So in your condition, because there's no small kids, there's no pregnant with, you're not pregnant, right? There's no condition where somebody has a health thing, and I'm not concerned about the health effects associated with San Francisco tap water. I would just drink tap water. If you're concerned about any of those things, health or taste, I would go. First, I would go with probably a 3-stage carbon system. This is the most cost-effective and probably has the least carbon footprint compared to RO. It's basically a mechanical filter in front of a carbon block. It'll cost somewhere between 70 and 80 bucks. Maintenance per year is something like 20 or 30 bucks. It's basically a Brita filter on steroids. It goes underneath your sink and it just integrates into your thing. It has a greater upfront cost. That's what I would do if I was concerned about these things longer term.
Would it take out the chlorine?
Yes, it does take out the chlorine.
Yeah, well, this is a question, there's other people have asked way more questions and things than I have. I've been pretty quiet. One thing I want to ask is, how do you analyze the water?
How do you analyze the water?
Yeah, well, particularly, there's several things that I only witnessed. One of them is a colorimetric thing. Is I noticed that when someone was filling a large white enamel bathtub, the water had a distinct greenish look. Now, what is the chemical that's likely to impart a color to the water? I'd like to show a large tub.
Okay, so there's a couple questions in here. So the questions are like, how do they analyze the water, and what is making my bathtub look green when I fill it with water? It's most likely some sort of copper sulfate. It's hard to say which one is making it green. In terms of how they analyze water, in terms of mineral content, it's a conductivity test. They just stick a little ohm meter in that measures the conductivity of water, and it's calibrated to what just strictly water is to what various minerals would be in it. In terms of particulate matter, they put a light meter in water, and it measures it bouncing off various particulates in the water. For particular contaminants, it's different for each one. There's a number of tests, but it usually boils down to like 6 or 7 tests. And they're all tests the municipal company does.
And are those published anywhere? Or
All this data you own. You own the San Francisco water data. It is your right to have it. They send it to you by mail twice a year. Every water company is required to do so. It's on San Francisco Water's website, sfwater.org. You can read out every single contaminant that they're required to list is listed there.
What I'm referring to is
The procedures are harder to get. You have to make a phone call. You have to call SF Water. That is also your information. It's set by the EPA. In order to get a copy of those, like I've gotten a copy from the EPA before. It's really boring reading. You really want to read that?
I want to see what kind of equipment is used. Because,
well, if you want to read it, I would call up the water company and just say I want to see what procedures you use. It'll probably take a little pushing, but you can get it.
Yeah.
I'll come to you in 1 second.
What is the potential for fraud, or has it been cases of fraud where you can easily just bypass all these procedures? I mean, is there constant oversight by the FDA?
What is the potential for fraud? And when you say fraud, what do you think?
There's nothing that's been done to whatever particular bottle you may want to choose, and it's just been, let's say tap water, even though you installed the version of tap water.
Good question. So the FDA requires a lot of scientific evidence to, they require testing on each lot that you submit to sell inside the U.S. So Fiji, I think the lot for Fiji is 24 bottles. If I got sick from this and I kept the bottle, they could track it back to a case of 24 bottles of water, and the data should be there. In terms of the oversight, how often the FDA looks at that, I know they have to submit reports twice a year to the FDA. In terms of how often somebody actually reads that report, I don't know. But in terms of its certification, it is actually a little bit of work to get certified. In terms of how often the upkeep is done on it, inspectors going out, I suspect the inspectors don't go visit Fiji that often. Probably once every 5 years, I would guess. But I'm not entirely sure about that. In terms of fraud, all of these companies have a really. If somebody got sick, significantly sick from any of these bottles, they're out of business. Like that.
I'm just saying, this becomes ingrained in the product, so complacency sets in, and all of a sudden there's no oversight, and the bottles are just simply. You're bypassing whatever you're representing as the quality of that product.
So the question about complacency and stuff, I guess I'll answer in this way. The only true external measure for complacency is if somebody got sick. That is the only clear evidence that the media will pick up on, that somebody will latch onto and say, hey, something's not right here. And it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in 20 years of bottled water use in this country. And I think if it happened, it's basically brand suicide for these companies. If somebody got sick from Aquafina, Coke is right there with Dasani to say, look, Aquafina makes you sick, goodbye, see you $2 billion.
So that here just keeps them honest.
I think bottled water companies do a good job because there's such competition in the marketplace. If there's anything I trust, it's the competition that these guys are in. What I don't trust is the margins and how much they charge. You had a question?
So you said we own the data for the quality controls on the municipal water. What about that part?
Okay. So the question is, again, back to testing on these water. We do own the data for municipal water because we pay for it. We don't pay for this data at all. So you do not have access to this data. What many of the companies are doing now is as the public becomes more educated, they're publishing the data. Fiji prints half a good portion of the data on their bottleneck. So it is likely that if you call, you can get the data. The FDA requires this kind of data on the side of Aquafina. 0 calories. I mean, like really useful stuff. Total fat, 0. Sodium, 0. Total carbohydrates, 0. Protein, 0.
Trans
0, I think. So I suspect if you want the data from these companies, especially sort of the niche ones that are like, say they have special health effects, you can get them, especially from their websites. In terms of you having, I bet you Aquafina would be hard to get it from, but the other ones you could get it from pretty easily.
So like I can know the levels of like chloramine in municipal water, but I'll stick those companies that.
Oh, there's going to be no chloramine in any of these 3. Any of these 4 on the table.
Well, anything else. But I'm just assuming that they're going to be safe because of the competition issue.
I think it's a fair assumption. And the data, the thing is, the data is something you have to request. I don't expect like any lay member of the public to call up Aquafina and look at the data and be able to interpret it. In fact, I think the public, the SF tap water data is highly unreadable. Has anyone ever read it? You tried. Could you read it?
I spent like 3 days studying the report because I was researching filtration systems. And I was trying to figure out what's in our water, what kind of filtration system do I have to buy to filter out what's in our water? And I have a friend who's a chemist, and I took it to her to help me read it. But it was really
So, if there's something I could change tonight, if I could leave you with something to walk away with all this, is to make this data understandable. Her question is basically, I got the report from the SF municipal company, and I couldn't read it. I didn't understand what all these numbers meant. I would say, make them send you something that's understandable. Because that is just a total disservice to you. It's a waste of like 41 cents or whatever it is to send this to you and you can't understand it. So the data, in terms of back to your question, the data isn't as valuable as their take on the data. I think there needs to be conclusions to the data, and I would almost demand that the water company bring in something and write like a recommendation based off of what they read on the data. Whether they do that or not, is up to them. But I would say that's the change that I would actually ask for. Let's take a couple more questions.
Just a quick one. There's these machines called alkalizers that are made in Japan, and they're sold here, and there's this sort of belief about water being alkaline is better for you, and then you have the acid side of it. I know I've installed it for several people, and I have no idea whether it's good for you. I know some people swear by it, and I'm sure you've heard about it.
It's the same.
Any comments on that stuff? That I did?
Okay, first of all, like if you hear somebody being like acidic water is good for you, generally I've never seen that. Like acidic water, the only acidic water I've seen anyone sell is they squeeze a lemon in your water. That's about it. So generally, all the mineral waters, they're a little alkaline to begin with. So the alkaline waters is the same idea as a lot of those mineral waters. Taking like a pH in that general direction. I don't know. It's all experiential.
They made it come from Japan. It's called alkalizers.
Yeah.
People installed it there.
Mm-hmm.
The alkaline pH helps you fight invasion theory forces better than acidic, which is sort of contradictory to what you would think. You would think acidic would be better, but alkaline is better. So maybe that's what that's all about.
In terms of like large range studies on alkalizers, like whether they have, gross effect over a large populace, no.
Oh, I do have another question, and that relates to something that people all have in their homes. They have a water heater. Inside the water heater there's a thing. I don't know if you know what the thing is. It's called an anode. It's a thing that's usually made out of some zinc or maybe it's magnesium. Who knows what the thing is. It's a metal rod. It's a thing for protecting the inside. It's a sacrificial element that protects the inside of a so-called glass-lined water heater, and it prevents the rust. But it does so by sacrificing itself. That's why these water heaters come with a 5 or 10-year guarantee. warranty against leakage and everything. Now, do you know anything about the health of drinking the water from the hot water faucet when it's been through the water heater that has an anode?
Okay, this is a quick answer. No. I don't. I just don't. I don't have an answer for you.
It sounded like an anodizer.
It's an anodizer on top of the water heater. What impact does that have on the water? And if I'm drinking that hot water, I don't know. I don't. I've never, ever. I can guarantee you, I've never, ever done any research on it. So we've kind of reached the end. Are there any last burning questions? So let me ask you this as we close. What's better? When you go home tonight, what's better for you, bottled or tap water? Filter tap. Tap tap? Tap tap. That's actually a good way of putting it.
Change the tap over.
I think this is important. I think it's an individual choice. You can't make the wrong choice for you. You can only make a more educated choice. If the taste bothers you of tap water, make the right taste choice for yourself. If the environmental footprint impacts your life, make the right environmental choice. If the concerns about health-related issues from plastics or chloramine or anything else, make the right health choice for you. It's all about a series of choices that's right for you from an individual basis. From a large-scale basis, we saw with the water taste test that it tends to equilibrate out. From the large scale, tap water is the right choice for us as a community as a whole. What you do as an individual is up to you. And that's kind of what I'll leave you with.